nothing needs to be cranked down. And when I was mentioning about adding your hoses, you don't want to take those things and crank them down. You literally want to put a torque wrench on, and you want 10 micronewtons, which, without having a torque wrench in front of me, 10 micronewtons is about that.
What?
Okay? What happens when you crank these hoses down is you flatten the O-ring out. And then eventually what happens is a leak, or you've cracked that O-ring. And that's probably one of the most common things that all of us have seen over the years of dive operations is leaky O-rings. You got leaks here. It's because guys are cranking the things down. So 10 micronewtons of torque is all you need. The minute you pressurize this, as long as it's fitted, right, as long as it's in there, and we've done our 10 micronewtons of torque, it should be good to go. All right? This plug is what I was talking about. So if this regulator is not in this tank, you want to keep this plug in there. All right? These plugs are important because that O-ring at the end, it's a DIN O-ring. That DIN O-ring fits on the end of this, fits on the end of this, and it fits on the end of this. So it's extra parts and pieces for you guys, right? So this goes in your Save the Dive kit as extra parts and pieces. When you put your regulator into the tanks, it's designed this way. It's kind of a pain in the neck. It's a little bit challenging to get the regulator in there, all right? So when you take that regulator out to fill it, I would just remove it that way and fill it with it on the BCD, unless, of course, you're going to put these tanks in a fracture chamber. Then you got to take the whole thing apart. The most important thing you want to note is on the end of this regulator that you have an O-ring. We're going to go over the proper way to put that O-ring in, and it's not just pushing it in and compressing it. You actually have to remove the center Allen key, and there's a filter down there. And I'll show you that when we get to it. But when you put this in, the easiest way is from the back side. You want the Interspiral logo there, and then you're just going to twist this in. What is the most important part about putting this regulator in is that it's clean. You don't want sand, grit, dirt, whatever else on that thread and putting it in to that tank. Can you put a little bit of silicone on that thread? The answer is yes if you're in a clean environment. The answer is no if you're not in a clean environment, because a little bit of silicone will help as long as you're not putting it actually in the breathing orifice. But if we're not in a clean environment, we're in the rig, we're out at the field, we're at the beach, you're gonna get sand, you're gonna get dirt, grime, grit, whatever. So the best thing is just wipe it off with a rag and feed it back in. Again, hand tighten, all right? Over different places in the years, I have found that person who insists on taking a pair of channel locks and locking these things down because that's the way they were originally trained and that's all they've known. And we've literally had to take channel locks and break this thing to get that off. We don't want to do that. Never use tools to tighten this stuff. All hand tighten. Why is DIN a better fitting than yoke? Does anybody know? So it's the threads, right? The yoke, you can put a yoke regulator on and tighten it, essentially, right? You have an O-ring in there, and if you were to back that off, just a quarter turn, you'll pop the O-ring if it's under pressure. With DIN, this has to be all the way seated or all the way off. Otherwise, what will happen? It'll leak. It'll leak. It's a fail-safe. All right, it's a fail-safe. And the same thing goes with our OEM hose. Unlike some of the aftermarket product out there where you can literally put it on and quarter turn it, this requires a full 6 or 7 full turns to then lock it in. Otherwise, if it's only screwed on a quarter turn, 3 turns, 4 turns, 5 turns, it'll leak. And if it's leaking, it's not on all the way. That way you should know that it's not going to come off. So all the way, right? Same thing with DIN. All right, so that regulator's on. The next thing that we'll do is place this on the BCD. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit of a trick. After a little bit, you guys will be comfortable and figure out how this sits on. But you have two spots here, right? 2 spots here. So this tank sets on there. You want to make sure that, I usually look at the bottom, make sure the bottom's good. Pull your little safety thing up there, and it locks in. All right. Now it's locked in, and it's locked in because this little spot right up here. Let's see if I can push this down. See this little spot right here? Yep. To release this, you need to lift that up and then slide the tank forward. Again, it's designed, Swedish design, fairly simple and easy, but safe, and that's their end goal.
Swedish,
yeah. It's like IKEA. It's like IKEA.
That's good.
How do you run your lines up and through is up to you. I'm going to set them up the way we have them set up, the way that we recommend you set them up. On the side here, I'm going to do the first one, you guys are going to do the second one. On the side here, you have these 2 little bungee knobs, and that is where your hose will go through on the side. Yeah.
Delicate.
Right? Now, if you choose not to run it alongside of there, you can run it up and through here if you choose. I prefer having it this way. So the Octo is exceptionally long so that you can deploy it and give it to your buddy, give it to a person in a car, in a boat, whatever situation you might encounter. And then what we do with that is we run it up and under here. And again, this is your choice if you want to do this. This is the way I recommend. I have other departments though that don't like it this way, so they do it their own way. And then you can pull this back to where it's about there, and then this gets tucked in here. This was designed and built. It's built by Ziegel for us. You can't just buy these anywhere. You have to buy it with the system. And this was designed by our European dive expert, who was a submarine rescue diver for the Navy. So he would dive down to like 500 feet on rebreather systems and do submarine penetrations and rescue those guys. He's got a lot of time underwater. He's bent more than most of us have ever even been in the water, I think. So this runs up and underneath, okay? This then runs under here. Continues under here, goes to this back clip. All right, and what that does is it allows you, once this is on, to have your gauge right in front of your face, and if you want to, you can pull it out, okay, so you can see it better. You will notice there's no depth gauge, there's only a pressure gauge, there's no compass. If you want a depth gauge, I've watched other departments, Lake Forest for instance, they've put a computer up here. We have used over the last 12 years a wrist-mounted depth gauge that nobody probably has worn in 5 years, right? Because we know how deep we are. We've surfaced, pre-planned everything. We've sonared it. We know exactly how deep we are with all that stuff, so nobody wears it anymore. All right, so that is essentially the setup of that. The rest of your BC, there's nothing fancy about this as far as anything new in the BC world other than it's polyethylene. It's the same as your dry suits that you're wearing now. Super easy to decon and dries in about 10 minutes, right? So there's nothing really on here that's going to require you to hang it and keep it drying for hours on end or a day or whatever. So it dries very quickly. It has 4 dump systems. So it'll trim you very easy. You have 4 options. You shouldn't have to get into a vertical mode or anything to adjust. Your weight pouches are as such. Molly attachments for whatever you choose. I have, remind me to get this for you, I have rigid plates that we're going to put in here. Because you use so much less weight, what we're finding is that these will slide out. They'll slide out like this because we have such little weight in there. So that rigid plate kind of helps prevent that.
And you're running currently your setup about 4 pounds per
yeah,
pouch,
4 or 5
and that's all
pounds.
you need.
That's it.
Okay.
Yep. So your weight system obviously is simple. It's easy. It's a double latch system. So you have Velcro, and then you have the latch, and you just simply pull on that, and it will dump. So that is what we're finding there. Is this rated for lifting? No. What's your policy? Harness or no harness?
Ice is harness.
So you'll always want to connect across, and I'll show you when we connect it.